Sound off with me, folks, on the Boston Celtics. Not exactly spreading cheer on Christmas Day at TD Garden as they fall 118 to 114 to Joel Embiid, Tyrese Maxey, Paul George, and the visiting Philadelphia 76ers. Listen, this game and this day did not go as the Boston Celtics expected, right? They come into this game, they're thinking they're going to be pretty close to fully healthy. Jrue Holiday missed this game. He's resting a little bit. He should be back soon. But they go into this game thinking they've got everyone else. And then shortly after the game starts, Kristaps Porzingis, who was playing great during the first quarter, during the first half, winds up tweaking his ankle and winds up missing the rest of the game. So he only played 13 minutes of this game and actually finished with 9 points, 3 assists and 2 rebounds during that time frame. So you lose him for the rest of the night. And at that point, things drastically change for Boston because you're missing 40% of your starting lineup at that moment. Jrue Holiday is out, and then now Kristaps Porzingis joins him. That's 40% of your starting lineup that you are missing for the far majority of this game. Basically, the final 2.5, almost 3 quarters of this game. So that was tough for the Celtics to overcome, and it wound up proving to be something that the Celtics could not overcome. The defense certainly was impacted by those 2 players not being out there, and for 2 totally different reasons. Jrue Holiday, obviously one of the premier perimeter defenders, so missing him against a guy like Tyrese Maxey, who was awesome during this game. We're talking awesome with a capital A. I believe he led the game 33 points, I believe it was. Yes, led the game with 33 points, and he was getting to the rim, just creating open looks for himself throughout this contest, and also dished out a game-high 12 assists, so creating shots for others as well. So not having Jrue Holiday, who is one of the top perimeter defenders in the NBA, especially from a one-on-one perspective, certainly affected the season that light. And then losing Kristaps Porzingis, who is Boston's rim protector, that's going to change things as well. So obviously he doesn't match up quite as well with Joel Embiid in terms of strength and size, but not having him as that rim protection against any of those drives where maybe Maxey got past his man or Paul George gets past his man, anything along those lines, you don't have that backstop back in the back to be able to protect the rim and possibly deter the Sixers from getting there. And they wound up scoring 42 points in the paint. That's not a crazy number. The Celtics actually scored 42 points in the paint as well. But you've got to think that if you had Jrue on the perimeter and Kristaps around the rim, that just drastically improves your defense. And not having them tonight opened things up a little bit for the Sixers, and they took advantage. You got to give credit where credit is due. That team shot a perfect 19 for 19 from the free throw line during this game. And that, in large part, was the difference. The Celtics only made 8 free throws. They only got there for 13 free throws. So they missed 5. They only shot, that's basically about 60% from the free throw line, while Philly shot a perfect 19 for 19. We're talking about an 11-point difference just at the free throw line. When you look at the box score, the Celtics made more field goals. They made 2 more shots in this game than Philly. They made 3 more three-pointers than Philly. You look at those 2 stats alone, and you think there's no way the Celtics could have lost, but it's that free throw margin. It really came back to haunt the Celtics tonight. So would love to see them get to the rim a little bit more, force the issue, and get to the free throw line because of it, just like the Sixers did during this game. Now, the Celtics were down by 16 midway through the second quarter, but then they found themselves a little bit. They stormed back into the game. They wound up taking a 4-point lead during the third quarter, and then they fell behind again by 14 late in the game in the fourth quarter and stormed back yet again. So they used an 11-0 run during the fourth quarter to cut that 14-point deficit all the way down to 3. And you're thinking, they got a shot at winning this game, but they just weren't able to finish it off. And again, credit where credit is due. Philly responded when it needed to. Right after that 11-0 run by the Celtics, Philly rattled off a 6-0 run to bump the lead right back up to 9, and that gave them a pretty comfortable standing for the rest of the night. Embiid and Maxey fully accounted entirely for that 6-0 run. So Embiid scored the first 2, and then Maxey scored the final 4, and that is what changed the game and wound up plugging this one into the win column for the Sixers and into the loss column for the Celtics. A few things that plagued Boston during this game. I'm going to name them off right here. Turnovers. I mean, this just some careless, uncharacteristic turnovers, and this has been something we've seen from the Celtics relatively recently. We're going to dive into this a little bit more later in the episode, but 13 turnovers for the Celtics, only 6 for Philly. So you're talking about possessions there that you're either giving away or not getting back. So Boston wound up taking 7 more shots than Philly. Despite that, just imagine if they took care of the ball. That shot margin would be even more significant, which just makes it that much more difficult for the 76ers to overcome. So you got to take care of the ball. Again, we're going to touch on that a little bit more later in the episode. Then the inability to get stops, like the Celtics they had it first stretch. On that 11-0 run, they got stops. I actually looked to a coworker next to me during the game, and I said, hey, they got to rattle off 4 straight stops here to get back into this game. That's when they were down by 14. Somehow they did it, but outside of that brief stretch, they just weren't able to get the stops when they needed them to be able to get back into the game and try to win this game. And in particularly during the fourth quarter down the stretch, they were not able to get those stops after they cut it to 3. Again, credit where credit is due. Philly wound up scoring, and they were the ones that figured a way out to be able to pull away for the win. The last thing that stands out from this game that I want to comment on is just the lack of bench scoring. And when you're missing, as I detailed, 40% of your starting lineup, when Drew Holiday is out for the entire game, and then you lose Kristaps Porzingis basically for all of the game. He played only a little over a quarter of this game. You've got to get more scoring from other locations, and the bench just simply did not deliver tonight. Only 12 total points off the bench for the Celtics, 2 of them from Neemias Queta, 4 of them from Peyton Pritchard, who had himself a rough night, 0 for 8 from long distance. You don't see that from him very often, but it happened tonight. And then the leader in the clubhouse for bench scoring for the Celtics on this night was actually Luke Kornet. He scored 6 points during this game. Also grabbed 10 rebounds, so he was solid out there. But when you're missing 40% of your starting lineup, you have got to get scoring from somewhere else. Peyton Pritchard is usually that guy. Sam Hauser is usually that guy, but they just simply were not able to contribute much at the offensive end tonight. So those are the things that stand out to me, but now we're going to get into some things that stood out to our fans. So a few comments coming in tonight. The first is from John Paul on the Celtics experiencing some December blues. And then we've got Dory Salmon on Boston's turnovers, which we already touched on just a tad, but we're going to go a little deeper. And then lastly, we've got Michael A. Gleb II on what the Celtics can clean up to get out of this rough patch here in December. So let's dive in. First one coming up is from you, John Paul. All right, as I said, first comment of the night coming in from John Paul, and he says, is the December blues real for the C's? ? We haven't been shooting well, and the energy and consistency haven't been up there. And I couldn't agree with you more, John. I think this is a nice, balanced approach to looking at the way the Celtics have been playing throughout this month. It just hasn't been consistent. You've seen maybe a lack of energy at times. Not sure exactly what that is. Maybe it's the NBA Cup, that time off maybe threw them out of their rhythm. Not quite sure what it is, and not trying to make excuses here. This isn't what we expect out of the Celtics. It's not what we saw in November and October. It's certainly not what we saw last season. So something has kind of been in the water for them throughout this month. It's just been slowing them down, and they haven't really looked like themselves consistently. There have been games, moments within games where they've looked like themselves, but overall, from start to finish, they're only 6-5 this month. You know, the numbers aren't great. 6-5 in December. 7 of their last 10 games, they've committed at least 13 turnovers. In 4 of the last 5 games, they've shot less than 46% from the field. So getting back to the point here, haven't been shooting well. Energy and consistency haven't been up there. Those are hallmarks of this Celtics team, especially last season and at the start of the season. Like, that's what makes the Celtics great. You're always shooting the ball well as a team. You're always going to have some guys who are struggling on offense. But as a team, always shooting the ball well, taking care of the ball, and then energy and consistency. Those have always, over the last year and a half, been at a high level. Very rarely do they get a clunker in those perspectives, but that's been kind of seeping in to their schedule here in December. So we got to look and see if the Celtics can turn that around. This has been a little bit of some real December blues. 6-5 is not what you would expect from the Boston Celtics throughout the course of a month, but they've got a few more games here to try to clean things up as they go into January and turn the calendar over. A game on the 27th at home, a game on the 29th at home, and another one on the 31st at home. So you got 3 more here at TD Garden with an opportunity to feel a lot better going into 2025. All right, next comment coming in from Dory Salmon saying, rein these turnovers and sloppy passes in, and the score would reflect a win every time. It's hard to disagree with that when the Celtics have so much talent that they bring to the court every single night, even if they're missing 40% of their starting lineup. Like, they've got other talent on the roster who can pick it up. If they just take care of the ball, it is so hard to beat them. So hard to beat them because you've, as an opponent who in most cases doesn't have as much talent, so you got a talent deficit going into each game, you've got to almost play perfect basketball when the Celtics are taking care of the ball and, as we've talked about, typically shooting the ball well and scoring well on offense. So I actually agree with you here, Dory. If you just clean this up in terms of the turnovers and the sloppiness, again, not sure where that's coming from, just seen some uncharacteristic attempts at passes, some bad decision making throughout the course of this month and especially over this last week or so when the Celtics have been struggling. Clean those things up and the score will likely wind up in your favor in the far majority, but far more often than not for the Celtics. If they clean those up, they're going to wind up with a win. That's what we've seen over the last year and a half. We've got a little blip in the radar here, but the team is the same. It's the same guys. So I'm not expecting that their mental approach and ability is going to change. I expect them to get back heading in the right direction with these categories in terms of sloppiness and turning the ball over. I expect them to iron that out, straighten it up, and get back into the win column on a very consistent basis once they do that. Just exactly as you said here, Dory Salmon. We appreciate you sending that in. All right, last one of the night coming in here from Michael A. Gleb II. And he says, every great team is going to go through rough patches. Preach. We'll be fine. We need to care a little bit more about details. All right, let's start out with the first comment here. Every great team is going to go through rough patches unless you are the greatest of the greats. Even look at the Celtics last season. They had 4 different times when they lost consecutive games last season. This is the first time. We're almost into 2025 at this point. You played all November. You've almost played all of December. You played a couple weeks in October. This is the first time the Celtics have lost consecutive games. So it's not as if they've just been losing left and right here. Every great team is going to have a rough patch. I agree. It seems like that's happening with the Celtics this month, and especially over the course of the last week or so. But to his next point, he says, we'll be fine. I have total trust in Joe Mazzulla and the players on this team that they are going to right the ship and right it quickly. I don't expect this thing to start spiraling downhill. I got a feeling that they're going to turn it around. They're going to turn it around in a hurry. I think some of it has to do with health. I think some of it has to do with maybe a little bit of a lack of rhythm, during this month as they've had to navigate some strange schedule quirks. Excuse me. Got a frog in my throat. But yeah, and by the way, in terms of health perspective, I tweeted this out before the game tonight. Al Horford tonight started for the 20th time out of 23 games that he has played this season. Remember, this is a guy who's supposed to be coming off the bench. So him starting 20 out of 23 games is an indication right there of just how much the Celtics have lacked health across the board this season. They've needed him to start more often than not, 20 out of 23 games that he's been available, because they've been missing other guys. So the Celtics have not been healthy. They got to try to figure that out. They got to get Drew back. They got to find out a way to get Kristaps back and consistent in terms of being healthy consistently, so he's not, missing a game here and there, a week here and there. They got to get him healthy consistently, and I think they will be fine, as Michael A. Gleb II says here. Now, caring about the details, I think the Celtics do care, but we've seen times, as we talked about here, with the turnovers and whatnot, that they have lacked in those areas in terms of taking care of the ball, taking good shots, the commitment on defense. I don't think it's a mental thing. I don't think they're making a decision to not care or care about something. I think it's just happening within the flow of the game that they're not executing at the high level that we all expect from them in those categories. They care. This is a team that wants to win another championship this season. I'm telling you, you go in the locker room, they care. They just got to make sure that they are executing in those areas every single night. And they're going to have an opportunity to get back in the win column and execute in those areas starting again in 2 nights. They've got a home game Friday night. They've got another one Sunday night. And then they've got another one on Tuesday on New Year's Eve. The next 2 games are 2 consecutive home games against the Indiana Pacers. As we know, the Pacers and Celtics always play each other tough, so this should be a fun weekend of basketball, competitive weekend of basketball for the Celtics. And then the Celtics will close out 2024 with a New Year's Eve showdown with the Toronto Raptors, who come to town. So a few games here that the Celtics certainly can and should win on paper. Now they just got to go out on the floor and execute at a high level to be able to come out on the win column and head into 2025 on a high note. I appreciate all of you for watching and or listening to tonight's episode. Make sure you send in your comments after the next game on Friday night. I'll be looking for them. I'll take a few in the next episode of Sound Off with the Boston Celtics. And until then, enjoy the time. Happy holidays. Merry Christmas if you celebrate. I'll see you Friday night.